We are recording, and I'm going to go ahead and open us with a prayer, and then we can begin discussion. The Lord be with you. I saw all your voices, all your mouths move. Let us pray. O God, by whom the meek are guided in judgment, and light rises up in darkness for the godly, grant us in all our doubts and uncertainties the grace to ask what you would have us to do, that the spirit of wisdom may save us from all false choices, and that in your light we may see light, and in your straight path may not stumble. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Okay. So I hope that you've all had an opportunity to read through the summary of the work of the task force to regather the parish. I kind of tweaked the name of the task force a little bit as I was preparing for tonight. It just seemed like regathering was a better description of what we're trying to do, because we haven't really been closed. We've just been dispersed, as it were, because we have been worshiping. We have been offering fellowship and formation opportunities, as well as mission opportunities. So we haven't shut down. We've just been operating in a different way. But we are looking at the ways in which we can begin to regather in person. And so that is what the task force is looking at. And the members of the task force who are on this right now are, let's see, as I go across the screen, Bill McDaniel has been sitting in with us as the senior warden. Bill Hurst is on that group, Bob Green, Clem Watson, and Harry Morse. And Bill Perkerson is also, and Shannon Quattlebaum are also on the task force. So that's a good group of folks. We're, I think that we've got some good people considering the ramifications of the decisions that we have in front of us. And what I want to do right now is to just kind of get a sense of what sort of questions you may have at this point as we talk about regathering. Excuse me. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute the people who don't have video right now. Let's see. Trying to find you all. And so if you have a question or a concern, just go ahead and speak up. Or if you're on video, I can't actually unmute some of you people. If you all want to go ahead and unmute yourselves when you have something to say, I guess that's going to be the best way to go about it. So just throwing up in the floor for discussion at this point.
Suze, did I understand that even with our 4 steps as they were listed, we still will wait for the bishop's okay before we open up?
Any in-person that we worship, that in-person worship that we do has to take place under the auspices of a plan that we submit to the bishop in writing prior to implementation of that plan. So we have to get his approval. I don't think that will be very difficult. Primarily what we're planning, what we have looked at so far is very much in line with what the diocesan guidelines put forth. So basically, as outlined in this summary, we're currently in phase 1, where we are only doing online worship, and we are doing that with 3 persons. One of the reasons that we're doing that right now, we could have up to 10 people in that space participating in the worship service. But if we do that, we have to mask. And I'm not sure how that will come across through video. I just have a feeling that being able to see faces is a little more conducive to an actual worship experience and less of a viewership experience. I don't know. How do you all feel about that? Yes, Robbie?
When you say that, like if there are 10 people and you have to mask, does that include like you and even if you're talking?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I agree with you.
So even, yes, Dorothy?
In the last couple of days, 2 of our relatives on Facebook have mentioned that with their hearing problems, they're having a really hard time when people talk with the mask on, that they have discovered that they rely on seeing people's lips more than they realized.
Yeah. So our plan for this point in time is to continue providing an online worship service that is with the 3 of us. You know, Will and I can be together in the screenshot because we are one household, and then a musician. And what we've been doing is bringing in musicians who pre-record, and we pre-record the readings so that we can have different faces and voices involved in the worship service. And we will continue that until such time as we are able to provide an in-person worship service for a greater number of people. Now, phase 2, we actually may roll out concurrent with phase 1. So what that means is we would continue the pre-recorded online morning prayer service. And then when we get through the gating criteria, and by that, the gating is language that we use for talking about meeting the criteria for moving from one phase to another. So when we have 2 weeks of the declining numbers that are required in the guidelines from the diocese, then we will probably look at having, in addition to the online morning prayer service that we live stream, we will also have at least once a week for a couple or 3 weeks, we will have a smaller Holy Eucharist that mostly involves the liturgical ministers and the ushers and the people who will be monitoring, so that we can work through the protocols and procedures that we need in order to have Holy Communion in a way that is safe and protects the health of everybody who's participating. And quite frankly, until today, when I got another set of guidelines from the bishop, I had no real clear idea of how we were going to be able to do that, because his prior guidelines said that I could not be involved in communicating people in any way. So it wasn't clear to me how we might have Holy Eucharist if I can't give the bread and can't touch the bread in any way, or the wafer. Then I wasn't really sure how we were going to make that work. But we did receive some guidance that provided a little bit of clarity about how that might happen. So when we get through phase 2, we would hope that we would be at a point where we might be able to gather in person in our worship space, still distancing, but there's a possibility that we wouldn't have to mask at that point. And so Harry's shaking his head. He doesn't like that idea. Do you want to say something, Harry?
Yeah, I really think the masking is one of the most important things we can do when we get a group together.
Yeah.
I personally think if you all are 10, 20 feet away from the group, that your masking is not important as our masking when we're in the pews. We talked about having every other pew blocked
Mhm.
and having the pews separated so you'd only have 3 or 4 people per pew, but a family group could stay together. Of course, if you had a group with a whole bunch of kids, they could occupy one end of the pew. But I really think the masking, the hand sanitizer, entering and leaving the facility, and just social distancing when we're outside the nave are the most important things we can do. Because if you're not masked and God forbid you have the coronavirus and you cough, you could be spraying all these people in front of you.
Right.
The other thing we
Well-
talked about, the only way to be 100% sure you'll be safe is to go into your bedroom and stay there for 2 years.
Yeah.
And most of us are not willing or able to do that. Because then you got to deal with all the mental health issues.
Right, right. So when I speak about the possibility of not masking, I'm referring primarily to the people who would have speaking roles in the service, the readers, the intercessors.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. If you all are up front, or if the lay reader comes to the podium and can bring their mask down and they're far enough away from the congregation, I think that's reasonably safe.
And we're also looking at the ventilation and the airflow of the nave. So the reason for that and is so that at that point, what we would like to do is to stream the Eucharist when we're able to celebrate it. And when we're doing that, we would like for people to be able to see the faces of the people who are reading to them. My face as a celebrant. Although I think you're right. Other than the times when we're speaking, we should be masked. And I would even think about, a very short homily, 5 or 6 minutes. And part of what we would do is streamline that service so that we are not spending, because my understanding is that the infection rate is dependent on the amount of time and the proximity that you are in other people. Is that correct, Harry?
Yeah, I think it's all a question of the viral load that you get in your exposure.
Mm-hmm.
I was sort of amused this morning at the Y. I saw 2 people talking very close to each other. They both lowered their mask to speak, and that this is not logical. So the social distancing of 6 feet, 7 feet, and even then, I think the mask. But I think when you're speaking and you're a good distance from the rest of us, and we've all got masks on, particularly as you mentioned for the hard of hearing, I think being able to see your face, see the lips of the lay readers and the clergy is very important.
They can sit up closer.
And I think you can do it safely.
Yeah. So one thing that we're doing in order to improve the experience of the online worship is we've got a group that's installing some of those pan tilt zoom cameras. We'll have two, one on each side of the nave, so that the ability to really sort of hone in on the person who's singing, the person who's, well, we won't be singing, sorry. That's not going to be able to happen for a while. But the person who's reading, the person who's preaching, the person who's praying, so that we can have some distance and still be able to see what's being said. And I want to also want to be really clear that we are not moving from one phase to another until we are convinced that it's time to move from one phase to another. I mean, we're not on a timeline here. We're not on a set timeline. We are watching the data, watching the numbers. Bob Green is our data guy, who's kind of collecting the data for us. Were you trying to say something a moment ago, Bob?
There we go. Well, yes. I'm generally an optimist, and I think these plans are terrific. But part of the gateway is continued reduction in numbers of positive tests and cases in the state. And so I'm a little concerned about what we might see in the coming weeks as we've opened. Prior to the time, I mean, not the church, of course, but the community and the state. I mean, we opened prior to reaching the guidelines that the CDC had recommended, as did most of the states who opened up. And so my job has been here to just follow the data. And again, the gateway criteria include the reduction in the number of cases over either a 14-day period or a 28-day period. And this is according to the guidelines produced by the diocese. And I'm already starting to see some bad numbers. So for example, I've been primarily keeping track of the Tri-County area plus Greenville in terms of the actual number of cases. And the number of cases increase every day. And especially in Greenville. Greenville has a fairly high percentage of positive results on the COVID-19 tests. But right now I'm looking at the last 14-day trend and from DHEC. And one of the things that they do on their graph is they have a dotted red line that projects the direction of the number of cases each day. And so it jumps around a bit. Now, and the graph I'm looking at now begins on the, I have a hard time seeing that far, 13th of May, and goes through the statistics from yesterday, which is from today's report. And the little red line that the state provides to show us the general direction is for the second day in a row pointing upward. That is, we're getting more cases, not fewer cases. And today was a huge jump, up to 7.7% of those tested positive in this last round. And as far as the total number goes, each day, but in the state, each day they go up. So today we're up to 10,629. I started recording on May 6th, which was the starting date that was given to us by the diocese. And on that, no, I'm sorry. I started looking on 17th May because I couldn't get back far enough on the data. And that day there were 8,816 total in the state, and today it's 10,629. So the numbers just keep going up, and we're just now probably beginning to see testing in the context of the wider opening of businesses and other areas where people can come in contact with each other and so on. So anyway, that's my sort of wet information on a wet day. So that's kind of what's been, sort of.
Well, and I think to Bob's point that none of us can predict the future. And excuse me, we have a lot of our neighbors who are not practicing any of the guidelines, and they're performing a big experiment. And we're going to see, and I hope and pray as the summer goes on, that the transmission curves and the reported cases continue to fall. Most viral illnesses are less transmissible in the summer than they are in the fall and winter. But this is a new experience for all of us. None of us have immunity, and there are a lot of people who are being pretty loose in their behavior out in the community, and we'll see. And I think a lot of them are probably around Clemson, because college kids are notorious for being immortal and not paying attention to any caution.
Being immortal, feeling immortal.
Dreaming of being immortal.
I do have some good news though, because the Golden Corner is actually relatively safe in terms of the numbers of cases on record. So one of the things that the state provides us is the percentage of cases per, or the number of cases per 100,000 population, and the Golden Corner's in pretty good shape. And for Anderson, the number of cases per 100,000 as of yesterday was 221. That's a pretty low number. Greenville's huge. Greenville was 1,344, which is actually higher than some states per 100,000. Oconee was at 59, about 60 per 100,000, and Pickens was also very good at 127 per 100,000. So those are pretty low numbers.
We have some of the best numbers in the state.
Yes.
Our proximity to Greenville concerns me, and we've talked about whether or not to include that in our sort of focus area. But I know from conversations that I've had with many parishioners that that people have gone there to go shopping, people work there. I think we have to at least watch those numbers and be aware of them, even as we are focusing on the Tri-County area for our criteria. Jack McKenna.
There's no question the infection rate is probably a hard thing to get real quantifiable numbers because of the limited number of tests. And if you do more tests, you're going to get more people, and so it may not be as good a number. The number that I think is more important is hospital bed occupancy. And so on the DAC website, one of the little buttons down there, you can look at the hospital bed occupancy, and the trend is going upwards all over the state. It's not just one area. There's some ups and downs and such, but right now the upstate's at 62.7% occupancy, and I don't know where it starts to get critical, where they have to decide, to move patients to a different hospital or something. But the trend is going in the wrong direction for occupancy.
Hold on. Most of that occupancy has to do with the resumption of elective surgeries. So the ANMED census was very low for the last couple of months. It has gone up a good bit the last 2 weeks because we're starting to do elective surgeries. So those are not all, by no means are those all COVID patients. And we can shut down elective surgeries again as we did before if we are reaching a critical bed shortage.
Harry, I have a question for you. The statistic that DHEC gives us is actually acute beds. So what does that mean? Acute hospital bed percentage.
Well, that would
Occupancy.
be any cardiac, anybody probably, and of course, I don't know what numbers they're tracking, but probably anybody on a cardiac monitor, the telemetry, and there are elective cases. Anybody who has bypass surgery or has a valve replacement is going to be in the ICU and on telemetry the whole time they're in the hospital. And if it was an elective surgery, they've not been doing those. So there's a big backlog of those cases from the last 2 or 3 months.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I only started collecting.
Active COVID cases.
The data that I started collecting again was on the 17th, and the numbers have stayed pretty similar. The percentage of acute hospital beds available, occupancy, and again, they're very good for Anderson, Pickens, and Oconee. There's a lot of open beds.
The hospitals, they're so good that the hospitals are going bankrupt.
Yeah.
They're losing.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
Because they really count
and
on
again,
those surgical patients.
Okay, so I want to stay focused on the concerns that everyone has about regathering. We are going to, when we go through these gateways, we're going to be looking at the numbers. Bob's doing a great job with that. And Harry's really helpful in interpreting some of those numbers for us when we get a little kind of lost in the weeds about it. But what I think I need to hear is whether or not you will come to worship under those sort of plans and the guidelines that we put out there. I'm not asking you to, I'm asking you if you will. And I hope that the distinction there is very clear. I don't want you to do anything that you're uncomfortable with, but I do want to have a sense of how comfortable you would be with coming back to worship under sort of the guidelines that we've put out.
Suze,
Yes.
I turned in, or I sent a note. I feel very comfortable about it.
Mhm.
At the same point, I have to say, in answer to Bob, I'm out a lot in the community and I have seen a lot of new students coming back. And the way I judge is they come out of Walmart or someplace loaded with all the things they have to do their apartments with.
Mhm.
But I still am very comfortable with it, even though they are unmasked and, nothing's going to happen to them. I think you've taken the right path, and I feel fairly confident in saying I would come back.
Suze,
Yes.
one of the concerns that we have is obviously as these students do come back, they're coming from all over. At what point, if we go down a path and maybe things look good and we do like what we hear with the planning, it looks good, but like all of a sudden September hits and are we still tracking data? I mean, are we still, because at some point we may have to reverse ourselves, right? Is what I'm thinking.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the way the gating works. You when you get through the gate, that doesn't mean that you're on the other side of the gate forever. If at any point we are in phase 2 or phase 3 and we see the numbers trending in the wrong direction, then we go back to where we were before.
I wish everybody would have that same philosophy. That's out there in the community. I don't think they do. Thank you.
I think you're probably right. Yes, Anna has a question.
Yeah, as one of the biggest germaphobes on the planet, I think it's important, and I know that you will do this, is that when we start opening back up again, my hope is that, especially for the people who do have real immunity issues, that we continue to record and broadcast, because I think that that's a really valuable lifeline for those people.
Yes, that's one of the reasons we're investing in upgrading our equipment, is that we recognize that this is something that we will be doing probably for the rest of our lives. I mean, that I think we've crossed, I think that's one gateway we've gone through that we're not going to go back through. So that is part of what we will be doing for the future. Yes, John.
Yeah, we had an email exchange about whether outside services had to follow exactly the 4 phases, and could we, if we were to consider outside services, do we have to follow all 4 phases exactly sequentially? Because an outside service might be a phase 4, but in the middle of the summer, we might be able to do an outside service, even though we're in phase 2.
Yes, I think
with
that
with the proper behavior.
My understanding of the guidelines that we have from the diocese, and we'll be meeting with the bishop next week to clarify this. But my understanding is that outside worship services have relaxed requirements for the numbers of people who can attend within each phase. So each phase has a maximum number of attendees or persons present. The phase that we're in now, we have a maximum number of 10. Phase 2 has a maximum number of 25. Phase 3 is a maximum number of, I think for our indoor space is 100. So my understanding is that when we get to the point where we are comfortable with our worship protocols for in-person worship, we can do outdoor worship. We would have to submit a plan to the bishop for that. But I think that because of the airflow and the ability to be farther apart in a space, say St. Paul's, that we could have an outdoor service when we get the trees out of the churchyard. Unfortunately, we have a couple of trees that have come down and have created a bit of a problem there for an outdoor service. Yes, Jack.
I just had a question, and when we talked about it earlier, I don't know if you responded back with an answer. It says 10. Is that 10 individuals or family units? Or, because I mean, it could be you, Will, and Cynthia as 3, 7 other people could be 2 families.
Yeah, right. So the idea of that limitation is that the people who are there are the people who are, for lack of a better word, producing the worship service to be streamed online. Does that make sense? So we're not talking about actual in-person worship. We're talking about that's the maximum number of support ministers that we could have, but we would have to mask if there were more than 3 of us.
Right. But in phase 2, I think the maximum was 25.
Yes.
And so, again, that, depending upon individuals or family units, you get a very different number.
So the way that I'm imagining phase 2 to work is that phase 2 is actually our training period, where the people who are there for the service are the support ministers, the liturgical ministers, the Eucharistic ministers, the ushers, so that we can work through our protocols for the time when we move through the gateway to phase 3, so that we know what we're doing before we get larger numbers of people together. Does that make sense to everyone? All right. Yes, Bob.
We had talked about outdoor services in our committee meeting a week or so ago. And I think, Suze, you brought up that if we're talking July and August, it's not really comfortable outside. It gets pretty hot around here at that point, but
I'll tell you what, I would do it. I would do it if we can do it safely, and if people want to. I would hold an outdoor service at St. Paul's when we get the trees out of the way, or in our pavilion when we get it ready. Yeah.
But the problem you're going to run into, though, if you do an outdoor service, is if you have a lot of people there and there's no sound system or anything outside, then it's going to be hard for some people to hear the service. So, I mean, you know, yeah, I'm all for having an outdoor service, but then you're going to be limited because you're going to have to be spaced out, and people that are spaced away from Suze or whoever is reading or whatever is probably not going to be able to hear what's going on. And so, you know, then you're making people frustrated because they're there and they can't hear it. So, it's kind of like going to St. Paul's. Every time when I bring my mother to St. Paul's and Suze does her, she can't hear, my mother cannot hear a word that goes on up at the front, you know, and she just kind of nods and does like that. But I know it's real frustrating to her because she goes to a service and she can't hear it. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that. We do have that portable sound system that we use in the parish hall. It's not great, but it is portable. We can take it with us wherever we go. None of this is going to be easy, because it's going to be a long time before we can be together the way that we want to be together. And that's part of the challenge of regathering, is that we want to be able to come together, and it's just unnatural not to walk up to each other and have a conversation and hug our friends. And that's going to be really hard to do. But if we are going to come together again, it's what we have to do.
Part of the problem, Suze, also with the summer and the heat, is where you would hold the service. Are you going to do it in the parking lot? Are you going to do it on the front lawn with traffic going by? And those are issues that also have to come up. The parking lot would be a terrible hot place to be. But the grass would be nice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and what do you do if the storm comes along? As SpaceX and NASA learned today, you plan for a service a few weeks in advance, and then there's a cloud that comes over.
Yeah. I mean, that's...
The other thing, Suze, I think is important to emphasize is the covenant.
Yes.
It's very important that anybody who comes to join the group cancels if they don't feel well. And if you have a sick child, and that's sort of counter to the way most of us grew up, you sort of struggle through your viruses. But if you don't feel well, please don't come, and agree when you do come that you're going to try to do the social distancing, be responsible for your children, try to wear your mask, and do the hand sanitizer. And I think those are the 3 most important things we all need to do to keep each other safe.
Yeah, and so when we come together to worship in the nave, um, Bill Hurst has done a really great job. He's laid out a seating plan that we feel will, we may need to tweak a little bit, but it's a really good start on figuring out how we can have people in our space and be distanced appropriately. But part of what that's going to mean is that you don't get to choose where you sit, and you don't get to choose which door you go out of, because we're going to dismiss people a row at a time, and you'll go out a specific door, so that we're going to manage the traffic flow so that people are not crossing paths and doing things like that. So it is going to be different. It's going to be different. Bob?
And then, but we've also talked about if we're allowed to continue to expand the number, possibly, you know, we have ways to connect the audio and so on, and we could do the video as well to the parish hall. So that's more space that we would have, and it's a lot easier, as Bill has pointed out, to rearrange chairs and stuff like that in the parish hall than it is dealing with the pews that, of course, you can't move. So there is that. And Bill has done a really good job, and as you said, and working out the numbers and how this stuff would work. But it does substantially cut the number of people that can sit in there. And it does leave also the issue of, again, family groups can sit together, but then that, you know, puts more on the ushers to make sure that you still get the social distancing that's required between family groups or between family groups and individuals and so on. So, yeah. Anyway, just wanted to point that out because Bill has done some really good work on that.
Right. I want to tell you that that the people who are on this task force are really, really doing a fabulous job. Bill Hurst, did you want to say something? I feel like I cut you off there.
Yeah, about that counting we did. We can be more conservative or a little less and all of that, a little more conservative, and we have a capacity in this nave of maybe 60 people, but it can range on up. But it's interesting that our rows are 6 feet apart. So if you sit people every other row, seems good, but you're exactly 6 feet nose to nose. And that nose, I'm not sure if it's nose to nose or shoulder to shoulder. So we have some discussion probably of all that.
Yeah. But we have some time before we have to have that all figured out perfectly, because among the other sort of limiting factors that we have, we need to make sure that we have adequate supplies of hand sanitizer and cleaning supplies, because we're going to have to clean very, very carefully, particularly if we need to have more than one service in a day to accommodate everyone who wants to come to worship. And right now, our ship date for those supplies is the end of June. And that's if they don't delay. So until we have those, you know, it's just not going to be feasible for us to come together to worship. Did you have something to say, Wendy?
I had a question. Does a family grouping count as one person, or does it count as 4 people? If you're going to say room for 60 people.
We're going to count numbers of bodies, but those bodies,
Okay.
the bodies of families can be together. They don't have to distance.
Okay. Thank you.
Cindy.
I know this doesn't personally affect me, but the children and so forth, that's got to be a a major trying to corral them and keep them distanced and not want, I don't know how what's been the feedback from some of the young families. Has there been any, have they been, or is someone represented on the task force? I didn't.
Pick up.
Yeah, Shannon Quattlebaum
Okay.
has been on the task force, but I think everybody does the best they can.
Mm-hmm.
Children are a challenge for us anyway, and a gift and a blessing and a joy. And like I said, if you really want to be safe, you probably shouldn't come out of your bedroom for a couple of years. So everybody's going to, granted, be taking some risk, just like you do when you go to the grocery store. And you go to the grocery store, you try to be careful. And I think we can do it carefully and safely. And children are certainly important to our parish.
They are indeed.
Oh, yeah. And
Yeah, but it's a
I was
challenge.
to say, I didn't, if it came across the other way, I apologize.
No,
I didn't mean for, I want them there and I want them to feel comfortable. And I guess I just wanted to be sure if there's anything you need to address or
biggest
there's
thing
been feedback.
parents can do is if one of your kids has a stuffy nose that morning, just bow out for that Sunday.
Yeah.
I was going to just interject with the spacing. At least the pews are a half decent way to corral things with smaller children. So, and as far as the kind of attendance you can have, a pew that's got a vacant pew in front and behind becomes kind of a pod. So there's the more people you can get in a group, if you're family of 5, or if you're like some of the community people that I've heard of that are early on kind of established pods to be able to socialize and do some of their stuff. So anyhow, we have that chance with directing how we seat throughout that nave.
And another thing to keep in mind is that just because of the equation of time plus proximity increases, the risk of infection, that we will have a streamlined service. We won't be able to sing. We can have pre-recorded music, which we will work on, but we won't be able to sing. As much as that breaks my heart, believe me, it breaks my heart. But it will be a streamlined service. So we're talking about maybe 35 minutes.
Well, I'm assuming maybe there won't even be an order of service. I mean, nothing to pass out. You just come in, you sit in your pew, and maybe, I don't know.
We probably will have an order of service, and one of the things I'm thinking about is just having them in the pew waiting for people when they arrive.
Okay.
There's no passing it out.
The ushers are going to get their workout.
We've removed the prayer books and the hymnals from the nave for the time being. Yeah. Jack.
You may have already thought about this, but when we get to the phase where we can have 25 or 6, and that's our number. When you take out the altar party and Cynthia and such, you're down to 22 or something. Are you going to have signups for how people can come in, or is it going to be first come, first serve? Have you thought about that?
No, in that phase, the people who will be in the service, in the Eucharistic service, will be the people who are supporting the service. It will be the altar party. It will be the ushers. We may not get to 25 people. That's going to be our practice phase.
Okay.
Now, while that's going on, we're still doing the the streamed morning prayer for the whole parish to participate in.
So what about
Jack,
the
the
six?
thought was that people would have to have reservations after, when we can have bigger crowds. You have to sign up to be able to come. You just couldn't walk up to the door and the ushers let you in. You would have to, we'd have to have some way, either online or have they could call, like people that don't do internet could call in and make a reservation. And then once we got to the number, that's as many people as could come to the service.
So really phase
An economist would say this is an opportunity to sell seats.
to sell seats. You want to put gates on?
Well, the other thing we talked about is
That
letting
came up. That came up. Remember, we're as Suze pointed out last week, we're Protestants. We don't. Our tradition doesn't sell these things.
Oh, the Protestants have sold pews before. Believe me. Harry?
But the other thing we talked about is letting the nave fill, first come, first serve, and then having overflow in parish hall.
Yeah. Rob?
And I suspect our problem is not going to be in a huge turnout.
Robbie, you had a question.
Yes. When you're in this 25-person stage and everyone has to be masked, including you, will there be a separate service that you're videoing for the people watching at home so that everybody at home is not seeing you in a mask? Very good. Okay.
Yes. Yes. So those two things will happen concurrently. And like I've said, that's a training phase. We want to make sure that that we have our protocols and our systems and everything down pat before we kind of widen that scope. So that we're not like, okay. So y'all may or may not know that my husband really, really enjoys music festivals. And he went to a brand new music festival 6 years ago. It was the first time they'd held it, first time in this venue. They didn't know anything that was going on, and it was a disaster. Nothing worked right, and people were very unhappy, and it was not really safe. But over a couple of years, they kind of got their act together so that when the people arrived, they knew how to get the traffic flow going the way they needed it to go so that people could enter safely and go to the places where they needed to go. So so that's what we're doing, is we're going to try to avoid the lock and fest disaster and just have a wonderful Holy Trinity experience. All right. Anything else? Yes, Clem.
Yeah, I would just point out that, there's a lot of good questions and comments and thoughts here tonight. And, being on the task force, we're asking that, we can receive as much input as possible. And you may be getting ready to go into this about the survey, but I mean, that's
Go
going to be
for
a
it,
good
Clem.
opportunity. Well, this will be a good opportunity. I mean, we need to hear everybody's ideas while, we do have a lot of knowledge on the task force, but we just, just like all the experts and at state level and federal level, they're not 100% either, and our task force isn't going to be either. So the more input we get, especially through that survey, the better we're all going to be as a result of it.
Yeah. So so we're working on finalizing the survey and hope to have it out Friday. you don't get it Friday, you'll get it Saturday, I'm pretty sure. I think we're pretty close to having something that will be, give us some valuable feedback. So that will come to you in an email, and we're just asking everybody to please fill it out. And it'll ask things like, would you come to an outdoor service? Would you feel comfortable coming to Holy Trinity? What is your experience of our online worship now? Because we are going to continue that, and we want that to be as valuable an experience as we can make it as we're going forward, because we're in that for the long haul. Anything else? Well, I thank you all for being here tonight and for listening and for speaking up and letting us know what's on your hearts and your minds. And like I've said a couple of times already, this task force is a really good group of people, and I'm blessed to know that they are here working alongside me as we work forward into the future. None of us knows what's going to happen, and it's very, very likely that about the time we get a plan that we like and we think we can operate, things are going to change. I just have that feeling. So, so your patience and your flexibility is going to be a key to our ability to regather. So I'm going to thank you in advance for that. And if no one has anything else to say, I'm going to dismiss you with a blessing, if I may. God bless you and keep you. God lift up his face upon you and be gracious to you. God lift up his countenance to you and give you peace. And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be upon you and remain with you always. Amen. It has been 3 months since I've been able to give a blessing, and that just really felt good. So thank you. And if you've got time, in about an hour, we're going to do Compline on Facebook, so join us. Well, take care. Stay well. I love you all. Bye-bye.